So chapter 4 verse 18 is where we stopped last time. We had read out the 18th verse. So he's been talking about how the self relates to action in this topic of the chapter. And the self, he's been reiterating that the self is the inactive principle of action. That's the contradiction, which people don't understand. So the consciousness, the divinity, enables your action, enlivens your action. Just as the sun above enlivens all life on earth. But the sun has nothing to do with what is happening on earth. That depends upon each person's cause and effect. As you sow, so you reap. It is your choices which create the effects in life. But you can't make those choices without the consciousness. So once you understand this, first of all, you get this clarity of thinking. You understand how life functions. So you get on to learning how to choose rightly, correctly. And in this verse, he talks about how you get back to that self, because getting to the self is the goal of all action. That is the only state where you attain that complete fulfillment all of us seek, that total happiness. So he says that he who sees inaction in action, action in inaction, is wise among men. He is a yogi, the doer of all actions. So in this riddle sort of way is the style of the Vedantic scriptures to make you think what he's trying to say. So what is the way to get back to the self is to remove this ego and egocentric desires emanating from this ego. That's what is impeding you, all of us. So how you remove a desire is by fixing your thought on a higher desire, on a higher goal. So that's what he's saying here. While you're doing your action, your thought should be on the inactive self, which enlivens action. And wherever you are, you recognize. That's what he says. Action in inaction. Means even though there's inactivity, if you're not acting at that time, you understand there is a self which enlivens, where there's a possibility of all kind of action. So in other words, your focus is on the self, not on the manifestation. That's what you got to understand. So our problem in life is we get involved in the action and suffer. So I was telling you yesterday, right? He quoted we were talking about what is self-realization in the Vedanta lesson, Vedanta treatise book. So he sees the whole world as an act on a stage. How is it possible? How is it possible for the actor to be objective to whatever's happening in the stage? He could be playing a great tragedy, but he's completely unaffected. How? Because in and through every act, he remembers he's the actor, not the person he's playing. That's just a role. So similarly, friends, if you can fix your thought on who you are, the self, and understand all this is just a role you're playing to get you back to the self, then you become objective. That is what he calls as wisdom. He is a wise person. He is a yogi. Yogi means a person whose goal is to unite with the self. Such a person alone is spiritual, is wise. So, where are your thoughts in life? A doer of all actions. So, he's emphasizing that. Doer of all action refers to the self which does everything. But the other implication of this saying this is what? A doer of all actions. What is he trying to tell us? Anyone? Kritsna karma krit, the doer of action, all action. He says you become the doer of all action. One is, yes, the self enables all action. You're focusing on that. That is the technical explanation. What is the implication is what I'm asking.
But the individual is responsible for all the actions.
Responsible.
Be dynamic.
Be
dynamic.
You should be dynamic. Doer of all action means you can only get to the inactive self through constant action. So it is a warning always in the Gita where he talks of inactive. It means the self which enlivens action. But he warns you not to be inactive. And the whole thing is totally misunderstood. Everybody starts this when they are inactive, retired. Just see the whole thing. I've told you. Nothing else to do. Okay, read Gita. That's the way people look at it. Dynamic. A doer of all action. In fact, the last verse of the Gita, what does he say? Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partha Dhanurdhara. Where there is a great teacher, a master of yoga like Krishna, and a Dhanurdhara, a dynamic archer, warrior, which means the knowledge only has an impact when there is knowledge with action. Not when you're not able to act. What is the point? So you become wise, a yogi, dynamic. So what we must understand, to bring it down to our level, it's very difficult to keep the thought on the self. That will happen one day. So what we need to do is make sure our thoughts are not on this ego and egocentric desire. So you're acting with an unselfish goal in life. That's what the focus has to be. Yesterday was a doctor who had come, young guy, one of my students, and he was asking, my thoughts are on the patient. Is that enough? I said, that's enough. Whole day, if your thought is genuinely a person has come to you to remove his pain, that's good enough. What can I do to alleviate somebody else's discomfort? That's why they've come to you. That thought is good enough. Forget about the self. That will come later on, much later. So what we have to be careful is whenever there is a selfish thought come, that's what I was telling him. Whenever the thought comes, will I get promoted? Will my ratings be good as a doctor? That has to be removed. You focus on your action. So same thing in anything in life, relationships. You get angry at your spouse. It happens every day, no? Why? You want them to do something. They don't do it. You're angry. So it is a desire. So that's what you got to catch. Why did I get angry? That makes you spiritual. And not identify with it. Move on to what ought to be done at that point. So that is practical. Now suppose I tell you, see inaction in action. They are shouting at you and you say, what makes them shout is the self. That is actually what he's saying. Now which day you will arrive, that takes a long time. No? What enlivens the madness? When will that come? Don't come. Fully involved. One sentence goes here, one sentence there. It's a conflagration. Every day. You are not yet experiencing. That's all. Two types of the people in the world whose breath has gone, breath has not yet gone. Right? So when I talk of marriage and all these fights, the people who are unmarried, they laugh. So one class of people who are married, not yet married. That's all. So it's bound to happen. And forget marriage, any relationship. The minute you have a relationship, there will be problem because expectation. So that's what you got to do. Where did I expect unnecessarily? Dismiss that and move on to your program of service and sacrifice. Then you're fine. So you got to learn to be objective. This is Vedanta. And that happens when you focus on a higher purpose. That's the only way it can happen. In fact, in the 5th chapter, he'll say you should be Padma Patram Ivambhasa. You should be like a lotus leaf in water. One of the famous verses. Next chapter, it's coming. So he doesn't get affected like a lotus leaf doesn't get affected by the water. So a lotus leaf is born in water, it lives in water, it dies in water. But it never gets wet. It never gets affected by the water because it has that wax covering, it has that insulation. So Vedanta is the insulation. Your intellect grows with this knowledge, you get totally insulated because your thought is on something higher. Like the actor's thought is on his real identity. He's totally insulated from the stage. Whatever's happening, it's completely unaffected. So what has happened to us is we've forgotten that we are the actor and you believe you are the role you're playing. Imagine if an actor starts believing. It happens. Sometimes it's happened. They get so caught up. One fellow in India many, many years ago, he playing Othello. He strangled his wife, actually strangled. And he was exonerated because it was done in a moment of, not intentional, but he was banned from acting. Now, who was going to be his wife in the act? The real wife also must have left him because in the act he can do this. What will happen in real life? So you can't afford to do that. You have to remain objective. This was 18. Clear? Shanti.
Guruji. Okay, in this thing about desire, expectations in relationship, how can a mother, when she knows a child is making repeated mistakes over and over again, and she recognizes this child to be a good soul and he can go on a correct path, but yet how can a mother not get involved and get frustrated? Just standing back and saying, well, this is his path, he has to. That is like a cop out.
No, it's not a cop out. It is a assessment of the situation. You are, just because you're the mother, it doesn't make you responsible for their life. That's the fundamental principle you don't understand. Any neighbor's child is doing those same mistakes, you're bothered. Some friend's child in India is doing the same mistakes 10 times worse. Are you bothered? You're not bothered. The botheration is my child. It's the attachment. You understand? That is what is bothering you. So, what you don't understand is a child, could be your child, could be anybody's child. They have their vasanas, nature. You have no control over that. The more you try and control it, the more they shun you. That's why every child is waiting to get out of your house. The parents are not you. The first thing they're waiting for in life is to go to college and get out of your clutches. Every child. So this is the attachment is bothering you, the mindness. My child is suffering. No, you're not objective to that. Number one. So you make mistakes. So you believe you own that child's nature and you want to change it under any circumstances. In fact, that is what creates half the problem. That's why they become rebellious. So even now in life, when they need your advice, they will not take it because they are so sick and tired of you constantly lecturing them all their life. So the way to parent a child is to live the life, an ideal life you want them to live. First, lead it yourself. And keep quiet. If you keep quiet, chances are they will ask you. This is not I think Lincoln said that, Abraham Lincoln. There is only one way to make a child go in the way you want, and that is to travel that way yourself. Einstein, setting an example is not the main means of influencing others, it's the only means. So you, as a parent, all you can do is set the right example through your action, which itself is a big question mark. Because nothing, I'm not attacking you. Every parent I'm talking about, generally. Parents themselves are fully selfish, self-centered, indulgent, and they want their children to be unselfish and disciplined. It's not going to happen. You work on yourself. If they are available for your advice, please give it. But a person changes when they want to change, not when you want them to change. So what you're saying is the same thing I keep hearing people about their spouses. If he decides, of course he can exercise. Of course he can diet. The fellow is obese and has never moved in his life. No, you can go on lecturing. You've tried 40 years. Nothing has happened. Only the couch has become deeper because only new thing he's got is the headphones, because then he can't hear you. You understand? So it doesn't work. Some have created a whole new room, home theater, so they don't have to even deal. Presence also is not there. Forget about noise. You understand? Good idea. So you understand? So this is it. So it's unfortunate, but what you must understand is the reason it hurts is the my. When my child is suffering, it is I am suffering. So in fact, you don't want them to suffer because then you won't suffer. Purely self-centered. You don't understand. You say, I'm mother, I'm father, of course. So if you really want to be a parent, you will lead that life and not give advice. What can you do? So by the time they are 13 or so, their vasanas are set. Once their thinking starts independently, you have no control. So the best thing to do is to be a role model. And the less you talk, the more they'll come to you. This is the way to do it. I've told so many and it's worked. So it's not just something we're talking off the cuff, These are I've quoted Westerners. When you say Vedanta, Vedanta is all about that. What was Arjuna's condition in the Gita? Horrible condition. Krishna didn't say a word. Not a word. Look at the disparity. Where is Krishna? Where is Arjuna? The level of intellect. That much disparity is not there between you and your child. Sometimes they are much smarter. And still he didn't say a word. Because he's not available. Arjuna was not available. Only when Arjuna surrendered, say, I don't know what I'm saying, then he gave advice. And at the end of the Gita, after giving the advice, which Arjuna wanted, what did Krishna say? I've told you what I know. Yatha ichchasi tadha kuru. Do as you like. And all the so-called religions, don't do this, don't do this. If you don't do this, you're gone. You're there. This is what it is nowadays. Where is that and where is the original? So whether it's parents or gurus or guides, whoever you are, keep quiet and set an example through your life. That speaks. So the time to mold them is between the ages of 4 or 5 to 13. I think it's a long time ago, no? Shanti? You grow a long time. Now you're in grandchildren category. You're talking about molding your children. Don't worry. You mold yourself whatever you can. So I'm not joking. That's the time you can mold them by making them see how you are living, not by teaching. That's the time they can change themselves by looking at you. After that, by setting an example, they may approach you for advice. But that will only happen if they feel they want to change. Yes, Minal?
Hariom Gautamji, follow up to Shanti's question. Does the same principle apply if a child has some kind of a disability, like kind of a...
No, that doesn't apply because they're not able to think on their own.
So in that case,
it's an obligatory obligation of the parent to do what they can. Okay. Obviously. Now you're putting in another factor. See, it's like when a child is 4-year-old and they are outside in the garden and they're eating mud. Yatha ichchasi tatha kuru. That's what I learned. You do as you like. You can't use that. He's talking to a grown man, Arjuna, who has a ability to think. So that doesn't apply to a kid, a 4-year-old. You have to tell them, you have to make sure they know what has to be done. They're putting their finger in the fire, you have to withdraw. But that's different. So you're bringing in something else. They're not able to fend for themselves. Right? Karina? Your parents bothering you, Karina? You please tell me separately. Yeah?
Hariom Gautamji. When you are trying to act unselfishly and for a higher purpose, how do you get rid of that thought that's like, oh, this is like helping me too, this is like also gonna benefit me?
Yeah, you shouldn't be thinking of how it's going to benefit you. You're having understood that being unselfish is what ought to be done in this life, right? You focus on the action itself, what you need to do, without thinking of how it can help you. That thought again makes it selfish. I hope the person will acknowledge that I have helped them. See, that's wrong, right? Because you're thinking of what you're getting in return. So, with your intellect, you've understood. In life, if you want to be peaceful, if you want to be genuinely fulfilled, you have to be unselfish. You can't be selfish, right? The whole society teaches you exactly the opposite. The whole education is based on a false premise that educate yourself so you can get more for the world for yourself and you'll be happier. It's a completely wrong premise. That is why the whole education system is in the dumps. It only churns out self-centered people, which is destroying society. First premise of education is educate yourself so you can be of service to others. Nothing wrong with education. How it's done is a completely wrong. So whole thing is built on a wrong foundation, which is why the entire society is collapsing. Right? You can see that, no? War and terrorism and greed, corruption, total destruction, divorces and depression. This is the fulcrum of that. One little change and the whole thing changes. Right? So ancient India was built on the concept of duty, which means service. What is my duty to my country, my family, my community, the world, humanity, right? So don't think of what you're going to get out. This has to be done. This ought to be done. I'm doing it. That's it. Even with children, like I was explaining to the lady before you, you do what you can for your children. Now, why do you expect them to be behaving in a particular way? That's the problem. My child should turn out the way I expected. My child should not be a average person. They should be brilliant. Sit and suffer. Your child could turn out to be average, not Einstein, not or turn out to be less than average. Who knows? Could turn out to be the next Einstein or Buddha. Who knows? Arun. Yes.
Hello, Gautamji. My question is with regards to you saying that knowing this life is a play, you still participate in it, knowing that there is an inactive self, but you still participate in the action. I understand that this will help in bringing more clarity in seeing what is good and what is not, and seeing things as they are. But won't it affect the quality of the action if you are not as passionate as the other person who is fully involved in it, thinking that this is everything?
This is
let's take your bit.
Yeah, understood. This is a very, very common question and a misconception. So understand, not just you, but anybody who has not been conversant with these concepts, this is everybody believes that if you're not selfish, which they call passionate, how will you achieve? See, you are right with regard to comparing to lazy people. This is called tamas. Tamasic people who are inactive, inert, lazy, compared to them being active, even though you're selfish, is better because at least you'll achieve. They won't achieve. Because any achievement requires action. So this is how this concept has come up. You have to be passionate. You have to be stressed. They give that also. You must have stress. Otherwise, how will you work? That itself is taught in the business schools. Obviously, that's true compared to inactive people. Selfish action is better than inaction, right? So selfish action is called rajas. Inaction is called tamas, laziness, inertia, sleep, sloth. So to that extent, you're right. Vedanta is talking about sattvic action, which nobody knows. That's why you're saying, how is it possible? I don't blame you. So in Vedantic action, spiritual action, you act as intensely as the selfish person, but your goal is selfless, unselfish. In fact, that gives you far more inspiration to act. Person who's inspired to fight for his country will be acting more, or a fellow who's just working for his family? What are you talking? See, the great freedom fighters and the people who worked with real achievement are the ones who worked unselfishly. Scientists who found cures for humanity, working for their family. I'll create a trust for my children. You understand? That's why Louis Pasteur and all these people worked. They worked for the sake of humanity. This is what you all should understand. It's a very, very sad misconception. Sakta karmanya avidvamsa. I told you, read the 25th verse of chapter 3 again. Sakta karmanya avidvamsa. Just as the unwise act attached to action, so should the wise act unattached. Loka sangraham, but for the welfare of the world. So as intensely as the unwise are acting, you should also act. That's what he's telling Arjuna. These fellows have all come here to fight selfishly. You should also fight them. But your goal should be the sake of society. So when you are unselfish, your mind is not agitated by this petty selfish desires. In fact, your ability to act becomes enormous. You're not bound by all these petty worries and anxieties. What will happen to me? Look at how you'll be able to act. My guru is 98, he's still acting. Still meets people and advises them. Action is still continuing. 98. So what are we talking? At 28 you want to retire. Ask any 28-year-old fellow. What is your goal? By 40 I should have enough money so I don't have to work. That's their goal. That's why they goal. I want to say hedge fund so I can hedge my life and never work and destroy my children. Till I was going to work, they were happy. Now I'm not working. I'm spending quality time with them. Their whole quality of life is gone. Two mad fellows are hovering around them. So, what are we talking? So you should go on Monday morning, you should be inspired to work. That is unselfish work. Now you're inspired only for Friday afternoon. Until Friday, you're just hanging in there. How are you doing? I'm hanging in there, man. I'm just hanging. Just waiting for Friday. All selfish. Waiting to get out of action. So you got to change your whole thinking.
Umesh? No, I was just talking about hump day. That's okay.
Hump day, yeah, right. That's when Khem educated me on that. Khem, what is hump day? So on the hump means on Monday agitation is growing. Tuesday agitated because you work 2 days. Wednesday agitation at the peak. That's the hump. Camel hump, And by Wednesday afternoon, so Wednesday is called hump day, means fully agitated. But then somehow you can see 2 days later, weekend. So the agitation goes less by Thursday, Friday. No joke. So Wednesday everybody is fully agitated. Don't talk to anybody on Wednesday. That's why I have Q&A on Wednesday to relieve everybody. Saturday, Sunday, little. Then by Wednesday, so much agitation. They need another dose, right? Then keep them going till Saturday.
What is the connection between unselfishness and objectivity?
What is the connection between unselfishness and objectivity? See, opposite of objectivity is involvement. When your involvement means there is an element of selfishness. You're involved in your own body, mind, intellect, right? So if you're truly unselfish, you're objective. Where's the problem? Unless you're involved in your unselfishness. Again, if there is a selfishness come in your unselfish work, you'll get involved there. So if you're genuinely unselfish, you will be objective. You won't be caught up in your petty. Like I said, a scientist is working for a cure for humanity. He's bothered if the lab air conditioning is little hot or cold. Only fellows who have no other goal in life are bothered. Every 2 degrees the weather is going up and down. Selfish people are bothered by little changes in their physical, emotional and intellectual demands. You understand? Unselfish people are not bothered. Swalpamasya hidharmasya trayate mahato bhaya. In the Gita he says that very little of this discipline will protect you from great fear. Even if you're a little bit unselfish, selfless in life, all these petty agitations, nothing will bother you. Swalpa. Swalpa means very little. Yes, Roxanne.
Seems like in our economy today, there's whole organizations whose only goal is selfish ends. So if you're working for that company, you can see why it would be soul sucking. Because how can you possibly be working selflessly for a selfish ultimate end? Like, would it be better to change jobs? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, it depends upon your situation. If you can work in a company whose cause inspires you, definitely you should. But there are people who cannot, right? They're stuck in a situation like that. So in that case, at least make it so you're working for the benefit of your co-workers and rather than just yourself. So in anything, you can make it selfless by your attitude. See, you had a family for selfish reasons. You can't deny that. You needed companionship. You needed support, so you have a family. So there is a selfishness involved. But if you work for the sake of the family without expecting anything in return, you can make that same field unselfish. So don't worry about the reason you got into it. What are you doing about it? But yes, if you can change your organization to a cause which you're aligned with, of course you should. So somebody is working in pharmaceutical, they are making money by selling medicine, but you can say at least they are finding cures for diseases. Let me work for that cause, right? Business is making money. You are making money out of that organization because you need a salary to live, right? So you decide what is comfortable for you. You are in a business where like one fellow many years back who works in Wall Street. He says our whole partnership is whatever each partner can make for themselves. Each one is self-centered. I said, you also make money. They are using the money to buy another vacation home. You use your money to serve. Why are you blaming them? So nothing wrong with making money. What are you doing with that money? So as long as you have the right attitude, I won't bother. But unless that particular cause itself is something you don't believe in, then why should you agitate yourself all the time? Move into a field which you are comfortable with, if it's possible. If not, Then you work on option 2, like I just said. How can I help my co-workers? What can I serve with my money? Whatever. So the next topic, 19 to 24, talked about how the actions of the enlightened are not binding. And how we have to understand this section is the same actions take you to enlightenment, the same principle. So you have to act in a way where your actions don't create further desires. In fact, your actions should remove your existing ego and egocentric desires. That is how you get to enlightenment. So the principle is the same. They work selflessly, they've achieved the state. We have to try and work selflessly to get to that state. So that's what these next few verses are. Another fascinating portion.
यस्य सर्वे समारम्भाः कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणं तमाहुः पण्डितं बुधाः.
He whose undertakings are free from desire and expectations, kama sankalpa, whose actions are burnt by the fire of knowledge, him the wise call a sage. So he's talking about first the principle of spiritual evolution. The principle. He's now slowly bringing in this concept of yajna. From verses 25 to 30, he'll get much deeper into that concept. The concept of sacrifice, the fire which burns the offering. That's the fundamental ritual of the Vedas, which is highly symbolic. Now, the symbolism is that which is talked about here, whose actions are burnt by the fire of knowledge. Jnanagni. So, it is only knowledge of something higher which can destroy desires of the lower. This is the fundamental principle upon which the whole knowledge of Vedanta is based. Vedanta teaches you that beyond your body, mind, intellect is your real self, the soul, the divine consciousness, which is absolute bliss and fulfillment. It's far superior to anything in this world. So, when you get inspired by that higher concept, obviously your small desires surrounding your ego are so petty and small, they fall away. See, it's like a person who's inspired, who's living in a slum, is inspired to earn enough so he can live in a penthouse. Now, once he works towards that, will he have desires for the slum? How can he? If he does, he doesn't understand that there's higher living, better living. It's as simple as that. So you may say, why are all the people following the world? They are completely full of ignorance. They don't understand anything of life. In spiritual infancy, literally. It could be a CEO, a president, prime ministers, anybody. Spiritually, they're infantile. People who you look up to. One child looking up to another child in the class. He runs the fastest. What of it? They're all children. So you just focus on gaining knowledge of the self. This will all be burnt. So once you have burnt your selfishness, that's what he says. There's no desire or expectation for oneself. See, they don't write for yourself because those days it was understood. Desire and expectation only meant for your own selfish purpose, right? They don't have to write it. We have to explain it every time because otherwise you say, how can you live without desire? You live for higher desires, not selfish desires. Understood? Such a person alone is a sage. The wise call him a sage. See how he puts it. So, all the people in this world, you will agree, are spiritually unwise, right? Yes or no? They're all wise? Total ignoramuses. So, who the world is calling a sage, does it have any meaning? My friends thought this person is a spiritual. Uh, does anybody have the caliber to understand spirituality in another? Why do you go by that? Who are the sages today? You know how they become so-called sages, mean known as sages or spiritual. They have to catch one celebrity fellow. See, like in India, what happens? One actor who is desperate for a hit, the last 5 movies have flopped. So he'll go to some fellow, hmm, take his blessings, and by chance his movie becomes hit. Not because why the movie become hit, because people liked it. Good movie he made by chance. Now he'll go and announce to the whole world that person's blessings, and the movie became hit. The only person who's in a hit is that fellow now, because whole plot will come to him. He's made for life. Just has to sit there and keep giving blessings. My business, can you give me blessing that will do well? Of course. He'll say, no, I'll give you blessing, it won't do well. Because a fellow like you, how can you run a business? He comes to me, I'll tell him that, no, you're not capable of business. That's why nobody comes. So, this is the world. Like Shakespeare says, beware, my lord, of reputation. It's an idle and most false imposition, oft got without merit and lost without deserving. Beware of reputation. Idle. It's just idle gossip. Like I said, one fellow has to say, actor or a celebrity. The whole world will follow. And even if you get it by deserving it somehow, one fellow has to gossip something nasty about you, everybody will leave you. So no person worth his salt will ever bother about what the world thinks. It's not possible for the world to understand. It's just not possible. So the wise who are spiritually evolved themselves, who have done some homework and understanding and are committed to spiritual development, they themselves will be able to recognize, yes, this person has some stuff. That's what he says. The wise call him a sage. Krishna's own time, there was no dearth of people criticizing him. In his lifetime. So what are we talking? Arjuna himself didn't know who Krishna was. What are we talking about? Negative person like Arjuna, who's a God's good man, not a very, very unselfish, charitable person, high character. He himself didn't know the greatness of Krishna till the time of the Gita, when they were in advanced middle age, not just middle age. They had children and all by then, grown up kids. What are we talking? Tamahu Panditam Buddha. Buddha, the knower should tell you that you are wise. So why I'm telling you all this is, don't go by reputation. Go by your thinking. Does this make sense? Is this going to help me? And verify it through your own life that the knowledge should help you. Then you're going somewhere. So a sage is a person who has no value for the world because they only value the self. Find me one such person. It's not the outer layers, wearing some dresses, some robes, going barefooted, bareheaded, having a beard, not eating, fasting, not talking. These are all what people consider as spiritual quality. Nothing to do with it. Do they understand what the self is? How close are they to the self? That's the yardstick. So the first principle, they have the knowledge. They understand the self towers above everything else. This world is nothing. That's the first qualification. Now he talks about how they act in the world. What are the qualities?
त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलसङ्गम् नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः.
Having renounced attachment to the fruit of action, karma phala sangam, tyaktva, ever content, nityatripta, depending on nothing, nirashraya, he does not do anything though engaged in action. So this is with reference to the performance of the action. Now, so you can gauge yourself how this is 100% spiritual, enlightened person we're talking about. So if you look at enlightenment, for them it is like you've woken up from a dream, you go back to the dream. Imagine having renounced. Do they have any interest, any attachment to the fruit? Nothing. They just do what ought to be done. So they don't do anything even though they are engaged in action. So doing here means, with regard to the opposite, you have to understand. Whenever we act, since we are mentally indulging in the fruit of the action, what am I get out of the action? Not only are you disturbed now, you are creating more desires in the future. This is the effect of your action. So if you want to be spiritual, what is the qualities? This is what it is. You just do what you ought to do in a spirit of service and sacrifice. That's it. Point one. So when you function like that, what happens? What is the first test which you can assess yourself? Anyone? I'm giving practical now. How you can assess the quality of your actions, everyday actions. Very interesting, very practical. Yes, Roxanne?
whether you're selfishly attached?
No, how do you assess that while you're acting? You won't know. What is the first test?
The mind is
Huh?
calm. The mind is calm.
Ever content, nitya tripta, which means you are content, you're supremely happy, just doing what ought to be done. See, right now, how do I assess the quality of my action? What is this action? I have chosen to teach you for your benefit. So, just the act of teaching should be supremely satisfying. Every moment you will feel that. But imagine if my thought goes to, oh, that person is attending. How can I make use of him to get more followers? Immediately there is a anxiety. The agitation comes. Your focus shifts from that present contentment. This is how you assess. So whenever you're acting, imagine if you could do this throughout the day. Whatever action you've chosen, you find satisfaction in doing what ought to be done. So how do you test that? The minute that you get attached to the fruit, I hope I'll succeed. I hope this person will recognize what I'm doing. I hope my manager is writing the right assessment for me. What action you're doing? All gone. Depending on nothing. So you're not dependent upon what comes out of the action, because doing the action itself is your supreme satisfaction. So if you relate it to your day-to-day action, then you understand what he's saying. Now, why people are miserable at work? Because they don't enjoy the work. Their constant focus is on what they're going to get out of it. I have to do this to get that. So doing this is horrible. That's why they're waiting to go home. They're waiting for the evening. They're waiting for the weekend. They're waiting for the vacation. Just want to get away. What a horrible life. I can't think of it. See, people who enjoy their action, they don't need a vacation. They don't need a weekend. You may take a weekend, but you shouldn't need it. So that's what he's saying. This is perfection. So you can gauge yourself. How much are you enjoying your present action? And you can only enjoy the present action when it is selfless. There's no thought of your selfish. So your whole focus is on the present action. This has to be done. I'm doing it. That's it. So think about it. And we will discuss more. I'll complete this explanation. Remember, next time. So if you questions, you can send it to us. We'll take it up on Wednesday for the Q&A. Hari Om.
Thank you.